Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody out there. Welcome to the 2005-2026 GMAT Club presentation on the Berkeley Haas video essays. I can't quite see who all is out there. Okay, we have our participants joining. So nice to see you today. I know there's some other events running concurrently with this one. So as folks trickle in, I know you might have your attention divided between different schools. I think this does get recorded and posted online. You could check it out later. But even if we end up with a few dozen folks in here, it'll make it a little more intimate and we could have a more focused conversation during especially the Q&A portion at the end. My name is Greg Guglielmo. I'm the founder of Avanti Prep. We are one of the leading boutique MBA admissions consulting firms. We've been partnering with GMAT Club since 2017. A lot of reviews online. We encourage you to go read them. We pride ourselves on the level of depth that we provide to clients, a level of commitment and care in a place where it's kind of hard, I think, sometimes for people to differentiate themselves. So go take a look at those. Another differentiating feature from a team perspective for us, listed there at the bottom of the page, is that we have Morgan Bernstein on our team. She is the former head of admissions at Berkeley Haas. So very, apropos, she's not able to join this video call today, but she does work with clients, obviously beyond just Berkeley Haas. But as it relates specifically to today's question and questions that we'll go through right now. Please feel free, by the way, to put your questions into the Q&A box as you have them. We'll be sure to address those later on. Just kind of big picture here. I always like to pull up a slide like this to acclimate ourselves with where we are in the application process and in the admissions landscape. This sort of runs top to bottom. There are many schematics out there that try to walk you through the flow of the application process. To me, this is one way I think about it. At the top of the page, you have some of the initial steps that you take when entering the application process. We offer clients an initial assessment. You break down, you start to think about your own story, questionnaire, picking things apart, your goals, why MBA, school selection, story development, test taking. The middle part of this page are really what I think of as the 4 pillars of application execution. So no matter where you're applying, no matter what you're focusing on, these are the things when we work with clients. I'm working with, a great many people right now in the final 3 weeks before Harvard, Columbia, Wharton's deadline on September 3rd, and all these others that follow in the weeks after. And pretty much everything we're doing right now falls into those 4 middle buckets, provided you've already done the brainstorming and school selection and stuff at the top of the page. School research and engagement, making sure you're connecting with schools, attending events, speaking with students and alumni. Very important, often overlooked. Essays, essay brainstorming and reviews, that's the topic at hand today. And it actually, if we were putting this to scale, it would probably be the biggest of those in the middle of the page. There's resume, of course, and there's recommender selection, preparation, and feedback if we were, if anyone wanted us to provide feedback on those. And then everything that comes after that, filling out the applications, waitlist support, interview prep, scholarship negotiations, and so forth. There's another way to think about it. And yes, of course, this does align with the services that we provide. We provide services up and down the application stream. What we're looking at today falls in this category highlighted here in yellow. It's essays and videos, and we'll get into those specifically for Haas in a moment. I mentioned Morgan a moment ago. Her experience truly is unique in this space. I mean, you go around the MBA admissions landscape, and a lot of people will say, I had adcom experience, or I'm a former adcom. In many of those cases, people might have worked in an admissions committee for like 2 years in a very junior role, not exclusively, of course. But here with Morgan, we have somebody who was on the Haas admissions team or worked at Haas for, 12 and a half years, 9 of those, actually more than that now, because it's three years later, that should say 2025 to present. Or sorry, she's with the president of UC now. But anyway, 12 and a half years with Haas, 9 of those in admissions, 4 of those as the head of admissions. And we'll see in a moment when we get to that first Haas video essay, what is now a video. Morgan was the head of admissions when they came up with that question. So we have a lot of insight. I'll be able hopefully to share a lot of insight into that today. And she is available again to work with you if it's on your Haas applications or on Haas interview prep later on. All right, enough preamble. Let's get into what you came for. And I see we have a question already. Okay, we'll come to that as it's relevant. Okay, Haas's required questions in this application season. This one, by the way, I don't think it's actually technically required. Let's just call this Haas's essays. I think de facto, though, we should think of this as a pretty much required essay. We'll go through these, but this is a little bit of a slimmed down for folks out there who are applying to Haas. This is a little bit slimmed down from the essay volume or essay/video volume that they've had in recent years. The big change, though, and these changes almost don't, in a way, they don't matter for you, right? You're only applying this year, but they do matter sometimes a little bit because in seeing the trajectory of these questions and how they evolve over time, we're able to kind of discern or remember or keep in mind things from previous years that that might still be relevant. But the big change this year is that first question: what makes you feel alive when you are doing it, and why? This has for years been a 300-word or was for years a 300-word essay question, and now it is a video, a 1 to 2 minute video that may not exceed 2 minutes. You have 2 attempts to record that video essay. If you were to go inside the application, by the way, you'd see that you can submit that video either before you submit or up to 7 days after. So just keep in mind a little bit of a timing nuance to that. The middle essay is a classic kind of goals, why MBA, why that school essay. We'll unpack that. It's 300 words. That's a little bit of a tighter space than people, often get for an essay question like that. You'll run into something similar. LBS, of course, has like the classic, what are your goals? Why do you need an MBA? How will LBS get you there? Wharton had that as essay 1 for years, and then they slimmed it down this year. Booth has kind of a version of this. You'll run into Kellogg as a version of this. Many schools do. This is Haas's version. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty classic. The challenge is it's only 300 words. So we'll talk about that. And then Haas, I think true to form, coming up with somewhat creative and or different type of essays. Here, they call it their distance traveled essay. We consider distance traveled as the contextual information that helps us understand the unique circumstances, challenges, or influences that have shaped your personal and professional journey. We invite you to share aspects of your background, personal circumstances, or significant experiences that have meaningfully impacted who you are today and how you've reached this point. And you could read the rest of it. We'll come back to that in a moment. Haas does have one typical, if you will, very typical optional essay. Remember out there, we don't have to go into a tremendous amount of detail on this. This is not an optional, wherever you see these for like mostly, for leading US MBA programs, these are not invitations to share an extra essay or an extra story. They are truly explanatory only. So as you go through your application and you think of things that, that might need a little more clarity or a little more explanation, they offer examples there: employment gaps, academic aberrations or underperformance, extra coursework, maybe an unclear timeline somewhere. Anything you think that needs extra clarity, it goes here. Haas even says, hey, use bullets. So it is purely explanatory. That's true. That is the same ethos as pretty much every optional essay you encounter for these leading US programs. All right. What makes you, I'm going to go through these and then we'll actually flip over. That's why I don't, if you've ever joined any of these videos of mine in the past, I'm not sure why you would have if you're a new applicant though. I like to stay live, kind of. We'll hit a bunch of different tabs. We'll toggle back and forth. This, by the way, is actually similar video Morgan and I did 3 years ago, 2 years ago, sorry, for GMAT Club, same topic, almost the same time of a year. But we'll toggle back and forth and we'll actually start to sketch out and outline some of these. I mean, it's tough to completely outline these, right? They're so personal to you. It'll be a little easier to outline essay two, or give you something to work with there. But yeah, let's give you some ammunition and fodder for consideration here. What makes you feel alive when you are doing it, and why? If Morgan were joining me here today, she would say it was around 2015 or 2016 when she and the others on the admissions committee came up with this essay question. Again, for years, it was a 300-word essay question, and it has kind of become synonymous with Haas. Now, again, the big change here is it's a video. We'll discuss the video elements in a moment, but I think from a topic standpoint, things to keep in mind, things we can reap and glean from different video sessions, blog posts, quotes, things that Haas has up on its website. A successful essay will share a specific and personal experience that helps the reader get to know you better, giving insight into your character, values, or how you would uniquely contribute to the Berkeley Haas community. Now, this last part, I wouldn't take too literally. It's not like a contributions essay. It's more what in your DNA you'd bring. I'd almost actually delete that because I think it's, although it's from them, it's almost a little misleading. I don't want you to turn this into like a literal contributions essay. This is more about your spirit, your ethos, your special sauce. It's challenging because it's so open-ended, and you have to tap into your soul and what makes you you. And we'll look at we'll discuss some ideas. This is, again, from Haas. This is the perfect opportunity to let us know about something we haven't already seen in the rest of the application, or to reinforce what you've already told us. What gets you up in the morning? This is probably an even better quote. What gets you up in the morning? What keeps you going? What grounds you or puts things in perspective? What excites you most about life? Don't forget to tell us why. We want to know the core of who you are. This is your chance to dig deep and show us your personality. What can we do over here? Where to even start on this, right? I often joke on video sessions like this, it's almost one of the hardest essay questions to do a video on, or to provide guidance on, because it's so, whereas with others, there are formulas. If we were doing the Kellogg video session today, essay one and essay two, formulas may be too strong of a word because I don't want to imply, that something is like overly scripted or overly structured, but there are things that you like need to include in those essays and parts, right? For certain other essay questions, in this case, Kellogg. But here with Haas, you have such an open-ended essay. Where do you even start? So I think, the first thing is, if you're starting at zero, or just kind of encountering this essay question, you got to kind of get a raw list down, or a brain dump of possibilities for you. Things you're passionate about, things you feel like you get lost in the moment, or lost in time, or lose track of time when you're doing things, looking back on your life that might make you feel like, wow, I was always so happy doing that, or that's such a great memory, or there's a feeling of fulfillment, tremendous fulfillment when you do it. These could, I guess, be professional or personal. I mean, professional, I think, is a little less common here and a little less compelling, unless you have the type of profession, or have done things professionally that you are truly passionate about. And, Godspeed if you have, because that's a unique, I think, space to be in. But, a successful essay, again, Haas's language here, will share a specific and personal experience that helps the reader get to know you better, giving insight into your character and values. Things that I went through and took kind of a straw poll of the topics that we covered, most recently, not this year, but in a couple of prior years with clients. And this is a kind of a random sample of those, just to give you a little bit of a mix of what's out there, or places you could go with this. I think people sometimes think of alive and they think of like adrenaline or but or like adventurous kind of things. It absolutely does not need to be that. Um, we have a list of half a dozen on there. One person talked about being obsessed with constantly observing or thinking about the history around them. And the essay opened with their commute to work. And we were like in the car or the bus or the subway or the train or whatever it was with them on the way to work. Another talked about their family business. This was a family business in like the restaurant industry. And they grew up in and around that restaurant as a kid and then worked there kind of through high school and beyond. And they talked, the essay opened, you see this line here about lure them in. We're opening with an example. That essay opened with the sights and the sounds and the smells of that restaurant. Another person talked about doing comedy or improv. Another who was a pilot talked about flying. Somebody else about long road trips. Another person about hearing a certain song and how that made them feel. So that's kind of the orbit that I typically find the most success in. And really, there is no right or wrong answer. It has to be true to you. Whatever gives you the ability to unlock this kind of spirit of yours, this passion, this purpose, this interest, this flow of yours. Now, the big thing, if I had to give you at least like a little bit of structure to run with, I would say let's think about opening with an example. Take us inside that moment. I just gave you a couple of kind of quick versions of that. Take us inside the bus ride, inside the road trip, inside the airplane, on the stage of the comedy or improv, inside the kitchen of the family business, the sights, the sounds, the smells. And then you will want to step back from that. And eventually, very importantly, in this video essay, tell us why. Why is it so meaningful to you? Think of those reasons. This phrase here is a phrase I use a lot when we're in the earlier stages of brainstorming and even preceding a lot of this essays, like story. You want to rip all the wires out of the wall of your life. It's why we send applicants we work with a questionnaire when we start working with them, 5 or 6 pages. I want you to rip all the wires out of the wall of your life so I can see what's in there. And then we'll be able to identify. So do that to yourself in order to try to identify this, what makes you click and tick and feel that flow. The hardest part of this is unpacking, picking the topic and then articulating the why, putting into words why that thing kind of makes you come to life. Morgan, I think the last time we did this video, she was talking about adcom notes. Put yourself in the shoes of the admissions committee on the other side as well, who are jotting down notes as they go. What is going to be, don't try to force it to be memorable, but you do want to. There's a certain when you are authentic and you do key in on these topics, there's a certain memorability, organic memorability to that will probably make its way into the adcom notes. Now, when we did this 2 years ago, GMAT Club provided us with a random draft. I don't know who it came from. It was a raw sample provided, and it was meant to be fodder for discussion for this, again, at the time, 300-word essay. I should mention now that it's a 1 to 2 minute video, you got to kind of time, we'll go through some of these logistics in a moment, but you got to kind of time yourself out. I would say that 175 words per minute, maybe. So we're still in that 300 to 350 word range. I think you want to, tough thing with the video too is I think you're still going to want to kind of script out your answer, or at least script out the notes of it. I would probably script it out. Even if you script it out verbatim as if it were an essay, I think eventually for the real video, you have to rein back the verbatim. You do not want to sit there for the real video and look like you're reading or reciting an essay. It's part of the reason, by the way, that they switch to video, or more schools migrate toward video, especially in the AI era, because they want to be able to kind of test your ability to communicate on the spot and your communication skills, and in some cases, maybe English language skills. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Even if you do script this, I know I'm talking about it as if it's still a written essay, but I think you'd go the direction of kind of scripting it out in the direction of an essay, but then you want to rein that back in so that you know only your key notes. Sometimes what helps people is to just put like the first word, eventually get to the point where if you know that there are like 10 sentences in this video essay, you only need to really know the first word or the trigger word for the next part, and then you speak it genuinely and naturally. You're, again, not reading an essay during the real thing. Content-wise, though, we can come back to questions about that. Content-wise, when we did pull this up last year, again, this was not reviewed by us. I think there were some, we might have corrected them. There were some spelling errors in there at the time. One big observation here too for a written essay. I know this is not a written essay this year, but there's no paragraphing in this. This is a video now, so it doesn't matter for this essay, but for your other essays, please use paragraphs. We don't want just a big blob of text. People don't digest that information. We want to give the reader the ability to digest the different pieces. Just use paragraphs. At the time, though, we kind of liked, Morgan and I, the direction or the initial direction that this was taking. Into a moment, the sights, the sounds, the feeling, something very meaningful to the person. The part where we felt there could be improvement, and again, the hard part of all this, is the why. So this part right here, hey, how can we unpack this a little bit more? Maybe reduce the opening example in size. I think reduce some of the, I don't know, this feels a little bit more like filler to me. 3 times to pass my driving test. Like, I'd want to, if I were going to run with something like this, I'd talk to me about overcoming fears. Talk to me more about love language for my family, overcoming fears, gaining new perspectives. I think the seeds, and hopefully this is illustrative for you, the seeds of the why are kind of lurking in here in the second half of the essay, but I think that they should and would more ideally be, the main focus of the second half of the essay. Not filler, but actual insight in the second half, or maybe second 2/3 of the essay, and the first third would be kind of an opening example. Let's cover. Let's move on, and we could come back. We could come back to that a little bit more during the Q&A. I know it's a lot to cover here in not a ton of time. The second essay for Haas, what are your goals? The exact question is actually this. What are your short and long-term career goals, and how will an MBA from Haas help you achieve those goals? Here it is in slide form. And what do I have on this page? I have 6 parts on this page that I would consider to be not all of the parts in exactly this form for this essay question, but for any essay question like this. When we think of your kind of master career goals narrative, these are my goals. And here's actually a slide that this is what I mean by like a master career goals narrative. Applies to this essay for Haas, applies to any other essay like it, applies really to the professional reasons why you're pursuing an MBA in general. Think first about what your goals are. Many schools will ask this. What are your short and long-term goals? What is the passion or purpose behind those goals? What is the impact that you seek? You want to be very specific with those goals. Then think very briefly, what knowledge, skills, or experience do I already have that are relevant to those goals? If I already have ABC, well, that's great. It gives me a relevant foundation, but I'm missing X and Y and Z. That's your YMBA. And then you could think about how each school uniquely fills those gaps. This is the kind of narrative structure that sits behind all of these kind of goals essays, goals narratives, similar interview questions later on. The reason I like to crystallize this so much, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, again, not to make it overly structured or overly formulaic, but it forces you, I hope, to be really specific about these things and to crystallize them. Tell me, what specific knowledge, skills, and experience do you already have that you need, that give you a relevant foundation? And what specific knowledge, skills, and experience are you missing and therefore need to acquire through the MBA? Think, please, about a diverse array of things, not just hard skills or hard knowledge or classroom knowledge, but what about soft skills? What about leadership? What about hands-on leadership? What about network? What about access to different perspectives that you might not otherwise have access to? What about conferences, clubs, case competitions? What about access to recruiting platforms? That's the kind of different stuff you'd end up with in here. So these parts, I have a video, elsewhere, sorry to skip around. It's right here. Deconstructing the career goals, why MBA, why our school essay. And in that video, we break down, it's available online. In that video, we go through these 6 things, and I think these 6 things are kind of the tenets of an essay like this. Again, not in exactly this form, and we have to kind of shape it to each question. So let's do that for Haas. Let's take these. I think with Haas in this 300-word essay, the first half of the essay, the first 1/3, I'm sorry, I would say 1/3, let's say, I don't know, 100 to 125 words, are these parts. You gotta tell us your short-term goals. You gotta tell us your long-term goals. And we wanna know why these goals are your goals. This is hard to do, by the way, in 100 to 125 words. But you'll have done this elsewhere for other schools. But we wanna get that in. For short-term goals, go deeper than just industry. We need to know the firm, the team, the role, the projects that you seek. For long-term goals, what is your compelling vision for the future? Be bold. Don't be afraid of being bold with that. What broader impact do you hope to have? What kind of industry problem or maybe quasi-social problem are you hoping to attack or solve? That can kind of tie in with this. All of this, and it can get fused together. I think in practice for this Haas essay, I often see this kind of bucket of items often delivered in like 4 to 5 sentences. It could be a single paragraph. It could be 2 slightly shorter paragraphs. But that, I'm going to say, is the first, I don't know, 1/3 of the essay. Now, very briefly, I call this a bridge statement. Just give me like a sentence that tells me what knowledge, skills, or experience you already have that are relevant to these goals. By the way, if you are applying to other schools want this in different amounts. Like LBS has a specific question in the prompt that wants to know even a little bit more about this. They have 500 words for that essay, so you have space for it. But here for Haas, let's try for a sentence that kind of tells the reader, hey, look, like I have some relevant base for this. Again, this is this part. The bridge statement is 1 sentence about this. So the first 4 or 5 sentences are this. Then there's maybe 1 sentence, a sentence and a half. It could be 2 sentences for some of you. Here's what I already have. Now the rest of the essay, the last, I don't know, by now what do we have left? 150 words or something, maybe a little bit more, 180 words. The rest of that is this for Haas. And that's really the juice here. How will an MBA, I mean, your goals, sharing your goals clearly and specifically is very important. How will an MBA from Haas help you achieve those goals? That is this. Let me put it in, I don't know, green. That's this. And really what Haas is doing here in such a tight space, I think it's good for you to think about these separately. What knowledge, skills, and experience am I missing? X, Y, Z. Here's how Haas fills each of those buckets. But really for this essay, I would think of it more like this in terms of delivery. Gap X, here's how Haas uniquely addresses this or fills it. Gap Y, same thing. These are each, usually when I do this with applicants, these are usually short paragraphs, each of these. And with these, again, it maps to this, but you're delivering them at the same time. You're not, there's different ways, of course, to structure this, but that would be my kind of recommendation or approach. That's really kind of the first the last, let's say 2/3 or 60% of the essay. I like a short paragraph each. And that short paragraph might be 2 to 2.5 sentences. I know that sounds short for a paragraph, but they're not giving us a ton to work with. With these gaps, again, make sure you are appealing to different corners of the MBA experience, not just the classroom. Haas is famous for the 4 defining leadership principles. Question the status quo, students always, beyond yourself, and what am I missing? I went to Haas, by the way. 2015, 4 defining. Somebody out there is going to know it. All right, here we go. Question the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. You want these to be in your mind for kind of all of Haas's application, but I think there's should very likely be an overt, explicit connection drawn somewhere in, one of these buckets. If you talk about Haas's community and culture in one of these areas, Haas's location and network could be another of these. Haas's programming, if it's very specific to you or tailor-made for you. These are going to vary by courses, clubs, extracurriculars, case competitions, community, culture. All of those started with C, but you really have to orient and be specific. And don't just laundry list stuff. You need to make an explicit connection between your growth needs and your goals as shared at the top of the page. With your goals, by the way, especially the short-term goals, make sure you research these. Don't just name random, like it should be true to what you're pursuing post-MBA, but it also needs to be informed. Do those companies actually recruit at Haas? If you're applying from overseas, especially in this environment, make sure that you have to talk to people at Haas who are recruiting, also international students recruiting for the same industry to find out which companies in that industry definitively hire international students and sponsor them for visas at Haas. And that'll vary by school. So there's a lot of homework you got to do it. And you can show that. You could pepper that homework into an essay like this. You can mention a couple of conversations that you've had. I wouldn't overwhelm the essay with that, but you want to kind of showcase that. Again, we could do an hour just on that essay. In this interest of time and to leave Q&A at the end, let's come to the final of these. I think I just have it written here. This is 300 words. At Berkeley Haas, we consider distance traveled. I think they call it a supplemental essay. At Berkeley Haas, we consider distance traveled as the contextual information that helps us understand the unique circumstances, challenges, or influence that have shaped your personal and professional journey. We invite you to share aspects of your background, personal circumstances, or significant experiences that have meaningfully impacted who you are today and how you've reached this point. Please tell us how these experiences have influenced your perspectives, decisions, and aspirations, how they contribute to the person you are becoming. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot in a way of optionality in there. Look at all the different, if we dissect these aspects of your background, personal circumstances, or significant experiences. It can be any of those. I think, the theoretically speaking, I think the primary intent here is to understand really specific elements of somebody's background that might not be otherwise obvious. Distance traveled, meaning from, where you might have started in life, or socioeconomic, parental, regional, family type circumstances until now. But you don't need to have had, it's not that you have to have overcome significant obstacles in that way in order to effectively answer this essay question. Again, look at what the different options are in there. Are there still things that maybe along the way you encountered, or significant experiences, or things you might have contributed or done throughout your life and work I think there's a little bit of an undercurrent here of Haas had a DEI essay that became a DEI JB essay, Justice and Belonging, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Justice and Belonging. There are hints of that here. They've clearly taken the explicit references to that out. But really, again, think of these different pieces of you, and how they've shaped who you are, how they've shaped, again, here, more optionality, how they've shaped your perspectives, decisions, and aspirations, and how they contribute to the person you are becoming. This is pretty open-ended as well, just like that first essay. It takes that initial brain dump. I would say to you, take these words and say, what is it? Say to yourself, what is it about my background, circumstances, or significant experiences along the way? And how have they influenced my perspectives, decisions, and aspirations? Just like that first essay, the Alive essay I kind of talked about earlier in the essay, I think you're going to share the experience, if you want to call it that. And then later in the essay, the insights, the why that matters to you, not always in 50-50 form, but some kind of semblance of that. Open with the experience, lure them in, and then share the insights. There's a version of that here at play as well. If you were to focus on a singular thing or a singular experience, then you probably have the space to talk about the situation, the challenge, the actions you took, the result, and then maybe the lessons or impact. And then you could get into this, you could get into the, how it shaped, and then how this shaped my perspectives, decisions, aspirations. So that would be for somebody, this potential layout would be for somebody who wants to focus on single significant experience. You're going to tell us about the experience effectively, and then you're going to tell us how it shaped these different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be all of these things. Others of you might, find yourself where you say, you know what, there's focus on element A, meaning a certain element of background, and then how this shaped, and then you might focus on element B. There might be two pieces to it. So there are different potential structures depending on how many elements or how many different things you want to address with respect to your background, personal circumstances, or significant experiences. And again, make sure you share how this shaped your perspectives, decisions, and aspirations. We've got about 5 minutes. I'm allowed, we could go an extra 5 minutes. But that is kind of a quick version of running through the Haas essays. Again, I could do an hour on any one of those topics. Other video tutorials, we've got the one from a couple of years ago with Morgan. The essay questions were somewhat the same, somewhat different. The deconstructing video, deconstructing that goals, why MBA, why our school essay. It's a couple of years old now, so some of the essay questions have varied, but the underlying construct is still absolutely relevant. And then another video, how to research and engage with MBA programs, and use the specific insights you glean to communicate your fit. That's big here, I think, very specifically for the goals essay, the why Haas essay, but it really permeates implicitly or in other subtle ways. It can permeate these other essay questions as well. Hey, if you have space at the back of this essay, contribute to the person you are becoming. That word contribute, I didn't address it a ton here in this middle essay, but let's keep that in mind. Like somewhere in here, it would be great, either in that middle essay, this one, as perhaps one of your parts. So not a gap instead of what you'd take, but rather what you'd give or bring. That could be interesting to consider. And if not there, if you find the space here, could you conclude with some commentary? So it asks about contribute to the person you are becoming on, person you are becoming, but also what you can uniquely bring to Haas. That is, I think, an interesting and effective way. And again, always keep these defining leadership principles in mind and other elements of Haas culture, built beyond just these. as you frame those up. But yes, talking to people at these schools helps sharpen your goals, helps understand the resources, helps understand who recruits at these schools. And if you're international, you need to know especially who recruits for international students within the industry or for the roles you're seeking. And how do you then translate those? There's some examples in those videos, some examples of how to translate those insights into actual kind of essay commentary or eventually for interviews. Feel free to check out our services, avantiprep.com. Read, absolutely, we encourage people to read our testimonials. And we are offering a special discount, 10% on anything Haas in round one for joining this session. I'll add that code later on. Again, if you do send us a free consultation request form, and Morgan is available and you want to note that you joined the video and, would be interested in working with Morgan if she's available, that's, on the table. So feel free to do that. Let's roll over to the Q&A. Oh, there's a chat here and a Q&A. I want to talk about our family business. I only provide external consultancy services on a frequent basis. Okay, so it's a potential family business story for the what matters most to you and why. I'm sorry, that's for what makes you feel most alive when you were doing it and why. I just quoted the Stanford essay. Yet every time I'm there and I help my family, that fires me up. It's a little tougher than the restaurant family business example that I gave because that has sights and sounds and smells and pots and food. But I think that but I think you can still do this if it truly is to the question, to Victoria's question there, if it truly is what fires you up, I think you can take us there. I think you can take us into that place. Is it who you see or who you chat with on the way while you're grabbing coffee or water or lunch? Is it this intimate place where you know or have known these people, not just family members, but maybe other workers there forever? Maybe since you were a little kid walking around that office, you used to walk around to visit family members who work there, and now you work there. So I think you can, if it truly fires you up, I think there's places to go with that. I will, yes, with GMAT Club, if there's a problem that I don't do it on a daily basis. Oh, like if it's a family business, but it's not where you work. Okay, but if it's a bakery, if it's a bakery, I think, yeah, same kind of logic applies to the restaurant I talked about before. If it's a family business that's there in your life, but you're not there every day, absolutely still fair game. If it fires you up, if it gives you that feeling, if you feel alive and you just beam when you go there, because you, again, see these people. So yes, I think even though you don't do that. Questions about sharing these documents, yes, I'll follow up with GMAT Club to do that. Let me actually see. Let me make sure this isn't in a weird. I'm going to make this one public. Anyone with the link. Okay, this should be anyone with the link now. And I'm putting that in the chat box. Question about student ambassadors. Morgan is Morgan Bernstein. And we go back up to the front page. Sorry about that. She's down here, right here. Actually, I'll put that there. Right now, student ambassadors at Haas are on break. Yeah, they're probably all interning. What do you recommend is the best way to touch base? I mean, I would look at ambassadors as a starting point. They should be coming back pretty soon, I would think. I know the beginning of the semester can get like pretty busy for them. I was actually a Haas student ambassador. It was my entree into admissions. And guess who was my boss when I was a Haas student ambassador? Morgan Bernstein was my boss. So that was my first blush. This was 2013, 14, like that. So I've been doing this for a while. I do this full time, by the way. So about as steeped into this as as really anybody could be. If the student ambassadors are on break now, student ambassadors when we were there, people would email in, and then we had to like figure out manual scheduling. It is a more of a Calendly world these days. So take a look, see when they get back. If the student ambassadors are away, then I think you probably want to go more like club to club. If there's a club you're interested in, if I'm interested in investment banking or tech or consulting, go to that club's website and look either on the leadership page or sometimes they have a tab that will say prospective applicants, or if there's some affinity or cultural or geographic group, you're from a certain part of the world or identify in a certain way, go to those clubs pages and there'll be a way to reach out. So you usually have to try like a few options, especially when they're busy with internships, the students. But if you send 3 or 4 inquiries and hopefully 1 or 2 people respond. Someone said, don't forget to share the link. If you look 1 minute before in your chat, it's got the link there, and that should be a public share. I had a nonprofit initiative back when I was in my early career stage. It sparked the fire inside of me. I'm no longer working on it. I focus on my career, but I'd love to start it again. I don't know if you're here listening. I'd be a little bit curious about how far back that was. Off the shelf, initial reaction, it's totally fair game. It feels, if that's what bubbles up inside and you're like, wow, I was happy when I was doing that. Link isn't opening, please make it public. Okay. Okay, it is public. Maybe I pasted it wrong. All right. If it does, I'm going to paste it one more time. If it doesn't work, I'll follow up with GMAT Club. The link is in this panel, the webinar chat, where you all are typing. Did I send it to, the everyone chat? There we go. Thank you for that. There's the everyone chat. I didn't see that little tab there. Now it's in the everyone chat. Thank you all. Let me know if that opens. It is working now. Okay. Is work experience compulsory? You gotta, yeah, essentially, yes. I mean, you can look at this. I actually did this with a client who's a senior in college. Literally the last call of last night was something related to this question. You really have to go school by school to see exactly how they answer that question. Obviously, if somebody is like a senior in college or finishing the last year of a grad program, many programs offer what people will call deferred MBA programs or 2+2 programs. That language comes from Harvard, what Harvard named it originally. And those are specifically designed for people who are kind of like in the last year of school. It gives you the ability to get a deferred admission and then go and work for 2 to 5 years in some cases, and then go and do the MBA program. You just have to go even for those, you have to research school by school. Do they exist? And if they exist, are they available to everyone or only to people who are in undergrad at that university? If those aren't there, then work experience is, I would say, de facto compulsory. You'll sometimes see a little hint of flexibility on that within the language or the FAQs of a given school. They'll say, if you have other significant experiences, it's not like, and you have enough kind of de facto work experience maybe. But if you look at the statistics for these MBA classes at Haas, we could pull up the class profile. Let's just do that so you could see it. Haas MBA class profile. The average work experience, full-time work experience at enrollment is going to be 5, sometimes even a little higher. 6, yeah. So 5 2/3 years. And look at the middle 80% range of work experience. It's 3.2 to 8.5 at enrollment. So if you have 0 years of work experience, you are at a pretty significant disadvantage. I would say it's de facto compulsory. There are, of course, exceptions to that. Back to that question about the nonprofit. Yes, absolutely fair game earlier in your career. If it sparks the fire inside of you, you're no longer working on it. But yeah, I think yes. It might get a little clunky if it's like way, way, way back in the past, like 15 years ago, and you haven't done anything with it since. Then I think and I don't know where I draw that cutoff. It was 10 years ago. I think if there was a little bit of freshness to it, or if you did other versions of that, maybe not exactly that nonprofit thing, but have you done other versions of that, or has it led you to do things similar to it that kind of picked up some of that same feeling, then I think you could position it as fairer game. That I think goes through all the questions in that. There's a Q&A. I actually like mentoring. It gives me fulfillment. Is that a good theme for making me feel alive? Or should I make my hobbies more in the alive part? Hey, I think mentoring is also, is fair game. It does not need to be I mean, some people might consider mentoring a hobby, but it could be a hobby, it could be mentorship, it could be professional or quasi-professional. I just don't know that I think with that, you just don't want to like make it sound, it should really, then we should really, if it's professional, feel the fire of how passionate you are about what you do professionally. Mentorship, yeah, but I think you'd have to dig into like or focus on a specific moment, a specific person, a specific place. Not to say that that's the only time you felt alive was with that person or place, but you wouldn't want to just throw the essay at this kind of mentorship so broadly. I think that would be too broad. Main values of Haas that the essays must show. I think we've, for purposes of this video, pretty much covered that. These aren't the only values at Haas. These are the core values, though. These are the 4 defining leadership principles. But think about other things. Let's see if there's another. I sometimes like to just pull up. That's not it. I'm looking for one other. I don't know if I have it up, but there could be other things like location for Haas, network, diversity of perspective, how you'll contribute, what you'll bring and give. There are, of course, these 4 defining leadership principles, but there are other things about the culture, community, and values of Haas, some of which I've just named, that I think you can develop an understanding on and try to cover or touch. Yeah, for the someone's asking about the presentation for that, maybe I can share it as view only. That would be my preference. So and the doc. Okay, let me see. All right, this should be view only on the presentation. That should go to everyone. There you go. Okay, the doc's probably view only. The other one's probably view only also, which is probably what it should be. Okay. Time to wrap up. Oh, next session starting in a jiffy. All right. Feel free to reach out. Thank you all for your time. AvantiPrep.com. Please absolutely read our testimonials. We do think they're different. You'll see why when you get there. Level of commitment, attention to detail, personal care, 10% discount on anything Haas. Morgan, just shoot me an email or yeah, free consultation form is probably the best way. And we'll get back to you. Thank you all for joining. Good luck. Reach out during interview prep as well, whenever we can be of help. Have a great day.